Erica Schickel is the author of You're Not the Boss of Me, Adventures of a Modern Mom. Her essays, book reviews, and reporting have appeared in the LA Times, LA Weekly, Salon, Tin House, Bust Magazine, and the LA Review of Books, amongst others. Theatrically trained, Erica has worked in film and TV for 30 years, both on camera and off as a voiceover artist. She's also written and performed both theatrical and solo work for the LA Theater Works series, The Play's the Thing, particularly notable solo show, favorite of mine, Wild America. Get it? Erica, Wild America, directed by Jo Beth Williams. Erica's memoir, The Big Hurt, is coming out to you in August from Hachette. Pre-order now. Welcome, Erica Schickel.
Hello. Hi.
Hello. It's good to see you. I know we're early in your book tour, the first, certainly not the last. So your book, The Big Hurt, compulsively readable, deep, beautiful, amazing, is a very big book. So I'm going to give a bit of the log line, and then you will respond a little bit. So the description is a memoir of growing up in a fractured literary family. Your father was the legendary film critic, Richard Schickel. You're being seduced by a teacher and kicked out of boarding school, which landed you in 2016 on the cover of the Boston Globe, and then doing it all over again in middle age when you broke up your marriage over an affair with the name that cannot be spoken, but happens to be LA's most famous noir writer. And our bright audience can probably Google it in 5 minutes, but the name is not important, your journey is. So if you can unpack it a little bit and take us back to the 1970s, your childhood growing up in a literary family. What was that like?
Oh, well, it was very privileged, of course. Manhattan, 1970s, two parents, both professional writers. Yes, my father was the film critic. My mother was a novelist and journalist. And it was the 70s. I was a Jodie Foster lookalike, unsupervised in Manhattan. It was a strange and predatory time. And a lot of the book deals with that.
Yeah, and I think, right, you are on page 6, rumored to be Woody Allen's schoolgirls, which never happened. Louis Malla's casting Pretty Baby. It just reading it, and I say these things, and but the book is so beautiful, but it is also really a slice of time. You were really in the middle of it, and not really knowing that.
Not, of course not. It all seemed perfectly normal to me. And, why wouldn't middle-aged men be asking me out on dates when I'm 15, Yes, Louis Malle's casting director came to Dalton, where I was in the 4th grade or 5th grade, looking to cast the young prostitute, and wanted to have me come in for an audition, which I begged my mother to let me do, and she actually refused, much to her credit. And Brooke Shields got the part.
So now you go, and I think I remember the 70s growing up in Malibu, there was the same kind of wild children running around, parents sort of, be free, do whatever you want, but we really kind of wanted some structure. Now you go off to boarding school, free to be whoever you want to be in this bucolic boarding school of Buxton. So what happened there?
Well, the setup for all of that is that because of my parents' toxic divorce, and I was starting to act out and do a little shoplifting and a little too young for it sex and what have you. And they finally sent me off to London for the summer to be an au pair when I was 14 for 2 children under the age of 3. And then I did a little shoplifting in London and got caught and sent back to the States. And that's when my parents said, this is it, we're sending you to boarding school. We can't do this anymore. And I got sent to this little tiny progressive bohemian hippie boarding school in the Berkshires. And it was a 180-degree change from everything I had ever known.
And you loved it. It was very creative and free. At that time, and we've seen the legacy in the Me Too movement decades after, where if a teacher and student dated, it was kind of fine. It was accepted.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's sort of an odd moment in the story where this affair happened 6 weeks before graduation. Just to set it up, I was an A student and a sort of a pillar of the community when I was seduced by this music teacher. And I, for some reason, thought it wouldn't be a problem, because the school had so tacitly condoned teacher-student liaisons the whole 4 years I'd been there. And then when they found out, of course, he was married, but yeah, I was actually rather surprised that they were going to kick me out because I thought it was fine.
Yeah, and we see that legacy later, but in your life, now you moved to Los Angeles, and we actually originally met as like PTA moms, which is the most outrageous thing about this. I met you in your other mode of a volunteer, a mom, and you were still thinking of writing, but of course with children, still trying to figure it out. And of course, and you're still writing and doing this into your life steps. Sam Spade.
Sam Spade. I call him Sam Spade because what's the point of trying to make up a name for him? And in fact, Sandra, you and I met on the memoir circuit because my first book in 2007 was called You're Not the Boss of Me, Adventures of a Modern Mom. And I'd been writing sort of funny, pithy little parenting essays. And then that published, and after that published, it was time to write the second book. And I thought I would write a hilarious, zany book about my bohemian boarding school days. And the big hilarious payoff would be, I got kicked out of boarding school for sleeping with a teacher, ha ha. And the minute I began to really examine that time for the first time in my adult life, after living with like years of shame around having been kicked out for having this affair. I mean, and then having my heart broken. So I was pretty traumatized without knowing it. So I started trying to write my funny memoir about this stuff. And I became flooded with sadness. And I just sort of succumbed to this sort of existential crisis surrounding my parents, my mother, deeply about my mother, what had happened to me at Buxton. And mind you, at this point, I had 2 children who were nearing the age I had been when I had been sent away to school. So I was re-experiencing my childhood by raising children and coming to understand the horror of sort of what had happened. I'd been thrown away by every single adult that was responsible for me.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it such an incredible book. And the time is too short to touch on everything about it. I must say, reading it, it's a big book. It's dark, but it's also hilarious and it's huge. And I think what's amazing about it is that you come out the victor. It's a book about love, about the healing power of love, and you come out like a hero or heroine, and for your kids also.
Let me just say too, I mean, to say it's about love, well, of course, anything of worth is about love in the end. But I mean, more topically, it's kind of about repetition compulsion. So that the affair that I enacted in middle age was almost an exact reenactment of what I had gone through my senior year in high school, in which I slept with an older, inappropriate, pedagogic male and blew up my personal world, was exiled from my community, my family, my profession, and I went into a long exile over it. So it was sort of, it was like I couldn't not engage this affair. It was like I had to re-experience it in order to understand it. And that's why I have the 2 stories in the book.
It's an amazing read. Rebecca Constantino gives a shout out. Can't wait to read it from the chat. Erica Schickel, thanks so much. It's fantastic. It's going to make a big splash. Erica's new memoir is The Big Hurt, coming out from Hachette in August. So pre-order now and avoid the rush.